Hello everyone, today I'm in Prescott, Ontario, and I'm going to take you on a tour of the Fort Wellington National Historic Site. Let's go check it out. Okay, we are now going to go into the fort. Please note that this attraction is free, and it is along the St. Lawrence River in Prescott.
Hello, bonjour.
Hi there, how are you?
Good, how are you? Welcome to Fort Wellington.
Thank you.
Is this your first time visiting?
Yes, it is.
Oh, perfect. So we like to say that today you're going to be visiting two forts for the price of one. The first fort is built for the War of 1812, however, is made out of some pretty poor material and ended up collapsing in on itself shortly after the war was over.
Okay.
During the war, we did see one important battle, and that was the raid on Ogdensburg, so the American city just across the river from us. We were successful in that battle, and we ended up winning, crossing the frozen solid river to the town and burning their blockhouse to the ground. That, however, is not the fort you're going to be seeing before you today. The fort that you're going to be seeing before you today is the fort from 1838 with the Upper Canada Rebellion period.
Okay.
The only thing remaining from the first fort is our earthen walls which surround it. All of the buildings inside date from that 1838 rebuild, where we saw one more important battle, and that was the Battle of the Windmill, which happened about 2 kilometers east of here at Windmill Point, and that's another historic site you can still visit today.
Okay.
During the Battle of the Windmill, that was a 4-day-long battle from November 12th to the 16th of 1838. It was fought between a rebel group seeking to free Canada from Britain's rule against our British military stationed here at the fort. And after about 4 days of fighting, the rebels ran out of food, water, and ammunition, and our forces were successful here, taking 156 men prisoner, 11 of which were actually tried and hanged for their actions at Fort Henry in Kingston. The year you're going to be seeing depicted before you today, though, is shortly after that. It's the year 1846, when we had a veterans-only regiment stationed here known as the Royal Canadian Rifle Regiment.
Okay.
These men, being veteran soldiers, had served about 15 years in the British military before they joined the unit, and then they'd have to serve another 10 to 15 before they could retire. Upon their retirement, they ended up receiving a plot of land here in Canada as a thank you for their service, and that was kind of like their retirement package that they got, and then they got extra privileges while they were within the unit as well, like growing facial hair, having second jobs in town, and then having their family stay here on site with them. So you're going to see a lot more of a domesticated fort life today. And if you have any questions throughout your visit, we'll be here at the gate on your way out, as well as we have a few more guides stationed inside.
Great, thank you so much.
Enjoy the visit.
Thank you, I look forward to it. All right, so we are now inside the fort. Straight ahead is the blockhouse. So we are going to explore everything that is in here today. There's lots of interesting historical hidden gems in here. All right, let's start here. This is the former location of the guardhouse, built in 1840. It's positioned directly beside the gate allowed for the supervision of all traffic coming in and out of the fort. Guards were permitted brief rest periods in this building, although they had to remain in full uniform to be ready to repel any threats. The guardhouse was demolished in 1973. All right, we're going to check out this building next. The officers' quarters were constructed in 1839 to house 2 officers with a private bedroom at either end, separated by a kitchen. Between 1843 and 1847, Lieutenant William Henry Sharp had the entire building to himself, in stark contrast to the crowded living conditions for soldiers and their families in the blockhouse. In the 1870s, the building was converted to a caretaker's residence and has since been restored to its original appearance. All right, let's take a look inside. So there's like a day bed, and there's another bed in the corner, And a table and wood stove. Right, so there's another room here we can look at. This is where the officers' meals were prepared and house chores were performed. Each officer had his own servant, regimental soldier, whose duties included housework, meal preparation, and clothes washing. Okay, let's look inside. Oh, there's like storage on this side. And a wood stove in the middle where they would cook meals. And a table. Here's another view of the blockhouse. Okay, so there's one more room in this building you can check out. There are many advantages to being an officer, including better meals, more living space, and some privacy. Officers spent time in this dining room, which doubled as their office. Daily, weekly, and monthly reports were prepared here. All right, let's take a look. There's a wood stove in the corner. A really nice grandfather clock. A dining room table. And a hutch. And there's some really nice soldier artwork on the wall. Okay, so next we're going to explore these items. So there's one more sign here. So this is the former location of the cookhouse, built in 1839, where the soldiers prepared their own meals. British Army rations were bland and often of poor quality. Luckily, the soldiers were able to supplement their diet with a vegetable garden located outside the walls of the fort. They could also purchase items in town and were allowed to hunt and fish. The cookhouse was demolished in 1966. There's no sign to say what this is, so comment down below if you know what this is. All right, so we're going to go into this building next. Built between 1838 and 1839, the latrine was the bathroom for everyone who lived in Fort Wellington for almost 100 years. The single stall was exclusively for the officers. The women and children used the two-seater on the left, and the soldiers shared the open facilities in the room on the right. Latrines were often used as garbage dumps and contain objects from the daily lives of those who used them. An archaeological excavation was conducted on the latrine pit, which unearthed thousands of artifacts like combs, children's toys, shoes, and even a wedding ring on display in the blockhouse. So here's a picture of the excavation. Here's some items that they found. All right, let's see what a latrine was like in 1800s. Wow. So we're talking about a very basic bathroom situation. This place stinks. Latrines lacked the necessities of modern bathrooms. Toilet paper was not available, and instead people used scraps of cloth or simply did without. There were no water tape for washing in any of these compartments. The rooms for the soldiers and women were open as you see them and held more than one occupant at a time. There was little to no privacy. Only the officers, due to their higher status, had this privilege when using the latrine. Wow. Very different than what we have today. Okay, so here's another view of the blockhouse. All right, we're now going to check this out. So, built between 1838 and 1839, this tunnel leads to a fortified strongroom that extends from the fort into the southern dry ditch. This room, known as the Caponiere, has 23 windows that allow for rifle fire to the left and right. This close-range defense feature was designed to make it harder for the enemy to climb over the outer walls and enter the fort. All right, well, let's go inside. Right, so make sure you watch your step. These are some big stone steps. And it's kind of dark in here. So, very narrow stone walkway. And the roof is incredibly low. It's like all like raw wood logs. I'm 5'5" and it's pretty low for me. Alright, so it opens up into this room. Oh, it's just stone room with a bunch of slits for firing rifles. The floor is just dirt and giant rocks, and the ceiling is just raw logs. Let's have a look through one of these rifle holes. Hopefully the camera picks it up. There we go. I think you can see it now. This is what it looks like. Right, so this is a pretty neat room. Definitely don't miss it when you come here. All right, so we're now going to walk back up the tunnel, and we're going to head into the blockhouse now, which is directly across, and there's tons of interesting exhibits in there that we can explore. Right, so this is what the blockhouse looks like from this angle. Let's go inside. Okay. see there's tons of interesting artifacts and exhibits we can explore in here. So here, hopefully you can see it with glass. So this is a musket crate reproduction. Designed by the Board of Ordnance, each sturdily built wooden box held 20 muskets and bayonets and were ideal for shipping and storing firearms. Right, so this thing in the middle is a shot furnace named after the British officer who designed it in 1849. The Addison portable shot furnace was used to heat solid cast iron cannonballs to red hot. They were then shot at enemy vessels to set them on fire. Weighing 720 pounds and fueled by coal, the furnace could heat 15 shots in 1.25 hours and subsequent loads every 20 minutes thereafter. Fort Wellington received an Addison furnace around 1848. That picture. So that is a shot furnace tools. Right, so that is this. And then this is the shot furnace. This is a mortar. Let's see. Mortar. British bronze 5.5-inch Royal mortar cast for 1800 by Francis Kinman for the Board of Ordnance. Here's an interesting display. Ammunition used at the fort 1812 to 1849. Musket and rifle balls were fired at soldiers. So, firing a soldier. Let's see, down here, canister shots spread out like shotgun pellets to wound several attackers at once. Okay. What else does it say here? A solid iron shot disabled boats, damaged fortifications, and injured soldiers. A red hot shot set fire to defenses or vessels. Mortar shells exploded into deadly fragments, damaging ships, fortifications, and personnel. So here at the bottom, so this is a 10-inch cast iron mortar shell. This one is a 24-pound cast iron cannonball. This one is a 12-pound cast iron cannonball. This is a cast iron canister shot. So this, an ordnance storeroom. This storeroom, an original feature of the 1839 blockhouse, was used by the Ordnance Department, which was responsible for the manufacture, storage, and distribution of ammunition, small arms, artillery, and associated equipment. 1,738 muskets were stored at Fort Wellington by early 1842, for issue to the militia in times of emergency. Probably most, if not all, of these weapons were kept in this room. The garrison of the fort kept its muskets at hand. In addition to producing arms and equipment, the Ordnance Department also recruited the Royal Artillery, the Royal Engineers, and the Royal Sappers and Miners. Right, let's go explore the next room. Right, there's lots more to explore in here. This is really awesome. So this is a coat of Sergeant John Carson. So this is a coat of Sergeant John Carson. So Fort Wellington Guard Room, the 1839 Fort Guard Room was located here. The artist's recreation is conjectural as limited details of the actual room have been located. However, the function furnishing of guard rooms was similar from post to post. The daily guard provided security for the fort, and soldiers on duty served for a 24-hour period. Typically, the guard consisted of 3 times the number of sentry posts, plus a sergeant and perhaps a drummer or bugler. An officer was in charge of the guard but would work and sleep in separate locations. Fort Wellington may have had 5 sentry posts: the gate, the ramparts, the garrison hospital, the commandant's quarters, and the commissionaire's storehouse, requiring a daily guard of 18. 2 shifts of sentries rested in the guard room while one was on duty. Off-duty sentries remained fully dressed and equipped in case of emergency. The room was simply furnished with a stove, shelves, forms, benches, a table for meals, and report writing, and a wooden guard bed. Muskets stood in racks by the door, and shakos and packs lay on shelves for ease of access. In 1840, the British constructed a new guardhouse just inside the main gate. This room was then converted into 2 storerooms. Here's the picture again. So you can see, here's where guards are sleeping. So they would sleep like right here. Not very comfortable looking. Okay, and then this is where they said they would keep the gun. So it says, guard room, artillery, and ordnance stores. This room was originally used as a guard room where all off-duty sentries could rest between shifts. After a separate guard house was completed, the room was divided into 2 smaller rooms for storage of artillery equipment. This is kind of interesting. Fort Wellington orders for guardhouse. No drinking, swearing, gaming, or other irregularities is allowed in the guard room. No soldier is to quit his guard without leaving. No individual not belonging to the guard to be allowed in the guard room except by permission of the commander. The standing orders for the guard are to be read and carefully explained to the men as soon as the guard is mounted, and again after the sentry's first post return to the guard. No soldiers are on any account to take off their clothing or accoutrements while they are on guard. Sentries not to be in their great coats except from sunset until sunrise, or when the state of the weather requires it. When ordered to turn out either as a complement to receive rounds or in case of alarm. The guard must fall in with the greatest rapidity, regularity, and quietness. And lastly, reliefs must at all times march with the greatest order and silence. All right, let's go check out the other rooms. All right, so this room explains that there were two forts. So Fort Wellington is the site of two forts. The first was constructed during the War of 1812 and was the main post for the defense of the St. Lawrence River communication line between Montreal and Kingston. The second fort was completed in 1839 on the same location and played an important defensive role during the Upper Canada Rebellion. So here is a diagram of the anatomy of the first Fort Wellington.
And nicknamed the Black Pit, and nobody likes spending a lot of time in there. So if you're misbehaving as a soldier, you could get sentenced to some time in the Black Pit from the officer, and that was.
And then here is the anatomy of the second Fort Wellington.
His military issued pants for beer money, and he got 40 days in the Black Pit. So.
And then this is kind of interesting. So regiments that saw service at Prescott. 1812 to 1837.
Did they actually sleep on that?
So that would have just been for if they were on guard duty. So that was like your break time bed.
So this is 1837 to 1863.
In barracks. So upstairs is our barracks. But that bed in there, so.
And then here is 1864 to 1923.
On shift for a 24-hour period. So if they wanted to lay down for a little bit, that's where they
Types of fortification along the St. Lawrence. This is the evolution of Fort Wellington.
Strapped into everything so that if they got
that's it.
Or something happened while they're.
All right, let's go check out the next room.
Spring up, grab their rifle, grab their hat, and out the door.
And I also saw in there on that wall, it shows like pictures of rifles.
Yeah. So that's where they hang all the rifles.
All right, so this next room is the barrack store. There's a sign on it that says, "Notice no barrack stores are to be found in possession of any persons not duly authorized to use the same."
My first day here, whenever 5 years ago now, whenever we were doing our little tour
So
around,
there's all kinds of
the room and our
interesting
boss
things in here.
forgot. I think she liked playing a little bit of a prank on us. Forgot to tell us that there was a cutout in there, and I had a little bit of a jump scare moment.
So the barracks department was responsible for building furnishings, but not the building itself, which was the responsibility of the Ordnance Department. Examples of barrack stores include stoves and their accessories, shelves, brooms, mops, beds, wooden washing tubs, cooking utensils, tables, and forms, which is benches.
Do you want to know what was in them? Do you know what was in them? Gunpowder. Good job.
Coffee.
So the charcoal was actually under the floorboards, and that was to keep the moisture out of the air.
Salt
Because
beef,
whenever black powder gets
peas.
moist, it gets clumpy, and then you can't use it.
So the Commissariat Department was responsible for the acquisition of food, fuel, firewood or coal, forage for our animals, and light, lantern oil or candles. The Commissariat was also responsible for the military chest, which contained pay for the troops and funds to pay contractors for goods and services supplied to the army.
So they would actually be able to like schedule their battles of like this battle is starting today at dawn or whatever.
A few other interesting things in here.
They try to do the same thing as local because those ones would also get clogged up in the same
All right, let's go
Yeah.
to the other room.
It's only pretty recently that we have ones that don't get clogged up with the rain.
This room is quite dark.
think it's a guy.
I know. I did too.
Inside here with our first court, we have like a little, we have like a little
So this room, it's called the Magazine and Shifting Room. From Fort Wellington's magazine could hold up to 400 full wooden barrels of gunpowder, each weighing 100 pounds in wooden racking. Barrels also came in half and quarter sizes. Whole barrels were 21 inches in height with a pitch of 17 inches. Each barrel was labeled, indicating the quality and the type of powder, whether for artillery or for small arms. By mid-19th century, it was fairly common to have the manufacturer's name and the lot number stamped on the barrel head. Gunpowder was never directly handled in or near a magazine. Charges and cartridges were assembled in laboratories, shell stores, and or laboratory tents. Kingston was the main military depot for Upper Canada and had a permanent laboratory as well as large magazines. It seems likely that most ammunition production occurred there with an allocation of finished products shipped to Fort Wellington. Here's a little diagram.
they look like they should be loopholes, like at least on this floor.
All right, let's go to upstairs.
But they're actually ventilation ducts that zigzag.
All right, we're now on the second floor. So we're now in the barracks room. When the fort was in operation, this barrack room was really crowded. Over 100 men, women, and children lived in this building in close proximity. Like a crowded bus on a hot day, it was probably noisy, smelly, and a hard place in which to relax. All right, so let's explore this room. It's got quite a lot of interesting things to see. So here you've got the dining table. So they would have to eat in shifts because there were so many people who stayed in this room. Some women, children, and some soldiers would stay in here. So apparently the beds were just like wood and then straw. And then for privacy, all they had was they would pull curtains, kind of like what you see in a hospital room. You would just close the curtains for privacy, which isn't much at all. And then here is literally a little station where they would wash their clothes, and even a bucket for the bathroom. That's all they had for especially at night or in the wintertime. And then they would do quilting, the ladies. And then there's all kinds of interesting soldiers' uniforms hung up. They're neat to see. So yeah, imagine having, I was told like 25 families would stay in here at once. So imagine living in these tight quarters with so many people. That would definitely be a challenge. Here's a washboard for washing clothes. Right. Let's go explore the next room. It has more exhibits. So Fort Wellington was home to British soldiers and Canadian militia from 1813 to 1870. The surviving buildings, written records, art, and trash they left behind help us understand the daily lives of the men, women, and children who occupied this post. Collectively, they tell the story of life in a military garrison during the 19th century. The objects selected reflect the most important periods in the fort's history: the War of 1812, the rebellions of 1837 to 1838, and border tensions in the 1840s. All right, so in this picture, there's the blockhouse that we explored. So right here, they did a big excavation. Archaeological deposits excavated at Fort Wellington reflect the different periods and military activities associated with the fort and changes that took place in the types of dishes, weapons, clothing, food, medicines, and other items used by the soldiers and their families who were stationed here. So here is an example of different things they would find. So there's like pots and plates and all kinds of different things that they would find buried, which is pretty interesting. So this officer's coatee. Militia officers purchased their own uniforms, often added details to suit their own tastes. This coatee, dated to the 1820s, belonged to Captain William Wells, who served with the Grenville Militia. So a garrison for Canadian militia and British regulars. Volunteer militia took the initiative in defending Prescott during periods of conflict with the United States. They were supported by British regiments who provided these part-time soldiers with training, administrative expertise, and professional engineers to build and maintain the post. Both militia and regulars performed garrison duties according to a strict set of rules which regulated all aspects of life at Fort Wellington. Okay, so there's all kinds of interesting artifacts here. A Wellington boot. Throughout the 19th century, military weapons improved in accuracy, ignition systems, and projectile design. The War of 1812 soldier carried an Indian pattern smooth-bore flint-lock musket. During the 1838 rebellion period, rifle regiments at the Battle of the Windmill used Baker rifles. The Royal Canadian Rifle Regiment, serving here between 1843 and 1854, were issued New Brunswick rifles. Oh, so here there are some cute little hats for kids if you're bringing your kids here. So there's all kinds of more artifacts here to explore. Each day was strictly organized around a series of inspections, roll calls, drill, and mealtime. Soldiers took turns performing sentry duties while officers rotated responsibility for daily supervision of the garrison. During the War of 1812 and the militia period, the military provided 2 formal meals a day, breakfast and a noon dinner. By mid-19th century, the Army also served an evening meal. While the militia left their families at home, some regulars lived in the blockhouse with their wives and children, who received partial rations. Women performed essential tasks such as laundry, cleaning the barracks, and looking after their children. By the 1850s, a greater range of commercially available products improved a soldier's life and that of his family. So here's all kinds of interesting things here that you can look at. Religion played an important part in soldiers' life. The local Anglican minister who served as army chaplain received a small sum to perform church services and provide spiritual support for the garrison, including baptisms, weddings, and funerals. So this is a picture of the blue church. There's another display. So this is about health and hygiene. The regimental surgeon provided medical care to British regulars and Canadian militia at the military hospital in Prescott. Soldiers' families supplied their own treatments, usually patent medicines and home remedies. Personal hygiene and bare cleanliness were encouraged to reduce illness caused by overcrowding and poor ventilation. So there's some interesting things to look at here. All right, we are now going to go up to the third floor. There's more exhibits up here, so don't miss them. Okay. So guarding the St. Lawrence, two forts have stood on this site. This exhibit outlines principles of fortification at Fort Wellington and tells the story of its role in the War of 1812, the Rebellion of 1837 to 38, and the border tensions of the 1860s. Protection against enemy bombs. The ceiling was made of layers of logs that could withstand the explosion of bombs. It was also covered with dirt as a protection against hot shot cannonballs, heated red hot. Oh, okay. So make sure you look up because there's a glass ceiling so you can see, hopefully it's picking up on the camera, you can see all the layers of logs. So there's multiple layers of logs to protect the blockhouse. All right, so this next exhibit, Defending the River Lifeline. So here's a map of the St. Lawrence River. So I'm here right now, Prescott. Right, so you've got Kingston, Gananoque, Prescott, Ogdensburg is right across from Prescott, Cornwall, and all the way over here is Montreal. So, defending the river lifeline. After several years of tension, the United States declared war on Great Britain in June 1812. The Americans attacked Canada, which was the principal British possession on the North American continent. The St. Lawrence was immediately threatened. At that time, the river was the major line of communication between Lower Canada, Quebec, and Upper Canada, Ontario. Prescott was an important link in this lifeline. Here, men and goods after traveling in small boats up the rapids from Montreal, were transshipped onto larger vessels bound for Kingston and the Great Lakes. So the raid on Ogdensburg, February 1813. Throughout the autumn and winter of 1812 to 13, the garrison of Ogdensburg made several harassing raids into Canada along the St. Lawrence frontier. On the morning of February 22, 1813, Major Red George MacDonald, temporarily in command of Fort Wellington, assembled his troops on the ice of the frozen St. Lawrence and launched a lightning attack on Ogdensburg. MacDonald's small force of 480 men overwhelmed the enemy, burned boats and military buildings, and returned to Prescott with captured arms, ammunition, military rations, and 74 prisoners. The raid had one other unexpected consequence. The residents of Ogdensburg asked their government not to station troops in their town again in order to avoid further trouble with their neighbors across the river. For the remaining of the war, the British were thus able to navigate freely around the town of Prescott. All right, so next, the Battle of Chrysler's Farm, November 1813. So I do have a full video about this. I will link it to this one if you're interested in learning more about it. So the Battle of Chrysler's Farm, a detachment of the garrison of Fort Wellington participated in the Battle of Chrysler's Farm. This battle was of pivotal importance in the War of 1812 because it ended American hope of severing the vital supply route by capturing Montreal. The battle also demonstrated the courage and skill of the British and Canadian troops who fought 6-1 odds to defeat an invading American force. Right, so there's kind of a fun interactive display here that you can explore. I won't read the whole thing to you, but it's kind of a fun way to learn. All right, so building the first fort. After the declaration of war, the military authorities decided to fortify the site of Prescott in order to protect transportation along the river. In the summer of 1812, the Prescott militia, on their own initiative, built a small stockade. Soon afterwards, the British built a cannon battery on the waterfront. In January 1813, Frederick de Gogrenben, a lieutenant in the King's German Engineers, began the construction of the blockhouse. The fort was half finished when it was garrisoned. In the fall of 1813, it was apparently completed in December 1814, only a few days before the signing of a peace agreement between Great Britain and the United States. In January 1814, the fort was named after the British hero, the Duke of Wellington, to commemorate his victories in Spain. Okay, so there is a fun little display in the center of the blockhouse that kids can play with. And this is kind of a fun little, there's a guy on the bench that you can sit with. All right. So, reformers, rebels, and hunters. During the 1820s and 1830s, a number of residents of Lower and Upper Canada called for democratic reform. Leaders of this movement, such as W.L. Mackenzie, made considerable use of the printed word and electoral platforms to voice their opinions, faced with the obstinate refusal of leading politicians to make changes. Several thousand reformers entered into open rebellion in 1837. The rebellion failed, and its leaders had to seek refuge in the United States. In the American border states, the rebels and their American sympathizers created a paramilitary organization known as Hunters Lodges. Members of this secret society participated in several raids along the Canada-US border, including the Battle of the Windmill, not very far from here. All right, so next is the Battle of the Windmill, November 1838. So early in the morning of November 12, 1838, about 190 hunters landed at Windmill Point. Most were Americans sympathetic to the rebel cause. Under the command of Niles von Schultz, they occupied the windmill and nearby buildings. On November 13th, some 2,500 militiamen and British regulars surrounded the hunters. They forced von Schultz's men to barricade themselves behind the thick walls of the windmill because they had no heavy artillery. However, they could not dislodge the hunters from their position. No fighting took place on November 14th and 15th. Von Schultz waited in vain for relief from United States territory while the British waited for artillery reinforcements. The turning point came on November 16th. Armed British steamboats patrolled the St. Lawrence. On land, the British maneuvered 3 field guns into position. In the afternoon, the guns bombarded the windmill for 2 hours. By nightfall, the hunters were running out of provisions and hope. They surrendered unconditionally. I will be doing a full separate video of the Battle of the Windmill historic site, and I will also link that to this video for you, if that's of interest to you. Building the second fort, 1838 to 39. The border raids of 1838 forced the military authorities to fortify several towns along the St. Lawrence. It was decided that a new fort would be built at Prescott because the old fort was in an advanced state of disrepair. Work began in the summer of 1838, but had not been completed when the Battle of the Windmill was fought. In fact, work on the fort was delayed by the battle. When completed in 1839, the reconstructed fort had changed considerably in appearance. The enclosure was more solid. The blockhouse was now a 3-story stone structure, and the yard contained new, smaller buildings. So there's a wheelbarrow, and you can see stone cutters and laborers. All right, so maintaining the peace, 1840 to 64. At Fort Wellington, the years following the rebellion were relatively peaceful, marked only by several civil disturbances and border tensions. Garrisons of the Incorporated Militia, the Royal Canadian Rifle Regiment, and later detachment of the Corps of Military Pensioners occupied the fort on a permanent basis. For most of this period, the town of Prescott became a prosperous commercial center. Okay. All right, so we're almost at the end. So tension along the border, 1865 to 1870. At the height of the Fenian threat in the spring of 1866, the authorities stationed troops at Fort Wellington. However, this formidable deterrent was never asked to fight. In fact, the American authorities in the state of New York disarmed the Fenians before they could attack Canada. The border tension was renewed in the spring of 1870. The Fenians this time sought to concentrate their attacks on the southern Quebec border and along the St. Lawrence from Prescott to Cornwall. The Canadian government got wind of these plans by an effective network of spies and again mobilized its troops. However, the American government stepped in to prevent the Fenians from carrying out their plans. a new mandate. In 1923, Fort Wellington became a National Historic Site. Its new mission would be to preserve and present an exciting chapter of Canadian history. The fort has been progressively restored to its appearance in the mid-19th century when a small garrison of the Royal Canadian Rifle Regiment occupies the premises. Here. So Fort Wellington, constructed in 1812 and 1813 under direction of Lieutenant Colonel Thomas Pearson and George R.J. MacDonald as the main post for the defense of the communication between Kingston and Montreal, and named Fort Wellington in honor of the victory gained at Salamanca, July 22nd, 1812. Here, Lieutenant Colonel J.R.J. MacDonald assembled the force that took Ogdensburg, February 22nd, 1813. All right, and lastly up here, there are some interesting military uniforms. Okay, so the last thing you can do in this building on the third floor, so you, around the edge, you can actually walk the edge of the whole third floor. And as you can see, it was used for defense as well. And the windows are a little dirty, but there are also tons of windows with great views. So there's some more interesting signage you can find along the way here. So, as a busy port town of the St. Lawrence, it was not surprising that Prescott had many establishments catering to hungry, weary travelers and sailors. By 1849, the town had at least 18 hotels and taverns, plus a brewery and a distillery. Many bars were located on Water Street in close proximity to the fort, and no doubt were the centers of rowdy nightlife activities for tourists. Okay, let's continue on. So there's still more. So you got some great views of the St. Lawrence and the edge of the fort from up here. As I said, again, all around you've got these for rifles, for defense. Railway marshalling yard. In the mid-1800s, the Canadian National Railway built a yard at the edge of the river for the transfer of supplies brought by ship. You can learn more about the yard and a War of 1812 gun battery located there during your tour of the Prescott Heritage River Trail. So again, there's some flies, but it's got, again, a great view of St. Lawrence River. So the Battle of the Windmill, approximately 1 kilometer away from here on Highway 2, is another National Historic Site where an important battle took place during the Upper Canada Rebellion of 1837 to 1838. This historic windmill, transformed into a lighthouse, has a connection to Fort Wellington. I will be doing another full video of this historic site, so stay tuned for that, and I will link it to this video. And I just wanted to point out, you can see, hopefully you can see, there is a huge cargo ship right now going down the St. Lawrence River It's a major shipping route, so you will see lots of really neat cargo ships. Okay, so there's one more sign, and then we're done up here. A real pain in the neck. This square hallway was the last line of defense for the British. They could fire down through the trap doors in the floor to prevent attackers from placing an explosive device at the bottom of the blockhouse wall. It is called a machicolated, apologies if I'm pronouncing that wrong, gallery, which derives from the old French word machicolor, to crush, and the Latin word column, the neck. So that is super interesting. Okay, so we are done up here, and now I'm going to, we're going to walk the perimeter of the fort and take a close look at the view of the St. Lawrence River. All right, so I'm just going to read you this information placket, and then we are going to walk up to check out the view. Hidden rooms. The bumps you see in the earthen walls are reminders of the first Fort Wellington. The original War of 1812 fort had 6 storage casemates rooms built into these walls. Each room was constructed of wood timbers and stone and was designed to withstand cannon attack, thus the term bomb-proof. They were used to store supplies and gunpowder, and one even served as a guard room. So, yeah, if you look at the hill, you definitely see some bumps that they're talking about. If you look closely enough. All right, so you can walk up. There's multiple ways to walk up. It's a bit of a steep hill, but it's worth the view. Right. So this is what the fort looks like from up here. And then there is a fantastic view of the St. Lawrence River from up here. So you can walk, it's fun, you can walk the whole perimeter, and there's some cannons you can look at. So here's one of the cannons as an example of what they would use to defend the fort. So up here, again, you've got a great view of the St. Lawrence River. And here's another vantage point of what the fort looks like in the middle. All right, so we have now explored everything in here. I hope you enjoyed today's tour of Fort Wellington. If you enjoyed it, give it a like. If you enjoy videos about things to do in Canada, please subscribe to my channel. Until next time, happy travels!